Hello and welcome back to the workshop, where today we're going to be making all the mounting hardware for Nessie's new steam whistle, which includes a bracket and a bulkhead fitting. But before we do that, we need to just go and remove Nessie's original 12-volt horn and measure everything up. So we'll go into the shed where Nessie's stored and we'll do that now. Right, so here we are with Nessie. The first thing we've got to do is remove this wiring, which is just inside the bonnet. So we're just going to lift the bonnet and snip that, because I'm going to be refinishing it when I stick the other horn on. So there's the wire. Snip it, as easy as that. Now the circuit to the horn is already isolated, so that's not going to do any harm. And then to remove the horn, it's just this 13mm nut, domed nut there. So once we remove that, I should just pull out nice and bonny. Right, so we'll pop the horn down there in the footwell. Right, now I've removed the horn. I've already removed the bracket which sat on there, but I'm going to utilise these two holes here because the new steam whistle is going to need a bracket on the inside of the engine casing to actually hold it. Now I'm thinking the steam whistle would look very nice somewhere, maybe about there, something like that. So what we need to make is a bracket, a 90-degree angle bracket that'll sit inside, that's slightly angled so that the whistle comes out the top of the engine casing straight, should I say. And what we also need to make is an extension piece for the steam whistle that'll screw into the bottom of the steam whistle and almost make it like a bulkhead fitting, so it can go through the bracket and clamp it in place, and then the airlines can attach to the bottom of that. So what we'll do, we'll measure it up and we'll go into the workshop and make them now. Now here we are, we've come up to the workshop. The old horn has already been removed, but I've brought the bracket up so we can measure the hole centres for the new bracket. So basically what we're going to do first is make a bracket out of this piece of 2mm thick steel. The bracket's going to be 50mm across, which this already is. I've already cut this by 100mm, and it's basically going to be an angle bracket, a 90-degree angle bracket with a hole drilled for the extension piece to go through for the steam whistle, that bulkhead fitting I talked about. And there's also going to be two mounting holes which is going to attach it to the top of the engine casing. Now here, where this 90-degree piece sort of comes off, the main part of the bracket is going to have to be angled down at a 16-degree angle, so that when this is mounted to the engine casing in that sort of orientation, this will be completely true, so the whistle comes straight out the top of the engine casing on its extension piece. So the first thing we're going to do is measure this metal for cutting to make the new bracket. Now it's already 50mm across there, which is the width I need it to be, but what we need it to be is 100mm in length. So it doesn't have to be too accurate, so we can just use a ruler. There we go, that's that. That's that. So we can just stick our ruler across there. So that's how long the bracket's going to be. Now I think in terms of width, I think 25mm will be plenty, because I don't want to add unnecessary weight. But it is 2mm thick, so it should be plenty strong enough, because the only load that this is really going to go under is just pulling the cord for the whistle, and that's relatively easy to pull. So it doesn't have to be too over-engineered. So we'll do it 25mm wide, I think. So that's that. That's that. So we can measure that. Cut that like that. And the same here, just this little outward bit, want that to be 25mm as well. So we'll have 25, 25. And that's that. So this part here is going to be cut out. So that is going to be the shape of the new bracket. If you can see it though, I don't know if you can in the light, but you can see the scribe marks. So yeah, that there is going to be the shape of the new bracket. But what I'll do before I cut it all out, I'm going to drill these, just because it's a bit easier when you've got something a bit bigger to hold. So I'm going to mark these up, drill it, and then cut the new bracket out, and we'll go from there. So first thing we need to do is just draw a little square here. So we want, we want 25mm there and there. So that's that. So what this will do is give us a nice hole centre. So what I've done there, that cross is perfectly in the centre of the bracket, so that is where the first hole can be drilled. So what we need to do now is measure the hole centres of the old bracket, because the holes on top of the engine casing are drilled to correspond with that, and then we'll drill the next one further up here at that right distance. So for hole centres, let's have a look. What are we? We are 40mm hole centres there. So what we can do is mark 40mm up here. So we know that's where that second hole is going to go, 40mm apart. So we'll just put a rough cross on there. And now what we need to do is just measure 12.5, which is the centre then of that bracket. So I've not got my glasses on today, so this is a bit more difficult. 12.5. So there we go. If we drill a hole there and there, then that should correspond perfectly to that bracket. Now the other hole we need to drill is going to be the one for the actual extension piece for the steam whistle, which is going to come out of here, and that needs to be 10mm in diameter. So again, all we're going to do, we've got a nice little square drawn there. We're just going to draw corner to corner in that square. And there we go, that's bob in the centre of the middle of there. So we'll drill a 10mm hole there, and a 5mm hole there and there. So I'll centre punch these now, and then we'll get them on the pillar drill. Right, so here we are at my little pedestal drill with the marked piece of steel. I've already centre popped where the holes need to go, so let's get drilling. Now first I'm going to drill a pilot for where the bulkhead fitting is going to go through. And next I'm going to drill the 2 holes for the mounting screws. A little bit of cutting fluid. Now we've got a pilot for where the bulkhead fitting is going to go through. I need to open that up to 10mm. I've just changed the drill bit for a 10mm bit, so now what we'll do, we'll open up that bulkhead fitting. There we go, that's the holes drilled. I'll just neaten these holes up now and then we can cut the bracket out. Right, so now I've cut the bracket out. I didn't film that because it's just noise and sparks. So yeah, I've cut the bracket out and I've also rounded these edges off just to make it look a bit neater. So now what I'm going to do is dress it all with a file and bend this little tab to 16 degrees. There we go, that's all dressed. So now I'll just bend this and then I'll give it a good clean and paint it in a nice matte black, and then that's the bracket finished. So there we go, there's the completed bracket done in a nice matte black finish with the bend on the tab, and that's it, that's the bracket completed. Now, the next thing is the most exciting bit. It's how to attach this to this bracket. Because what we need to do is the bracket's going to sit like that on the engine casing, and this is going to have to sort of sit up like that. So what we need to make is what they call a bulkhead fitting. And I'm going to make one out of this piece of brass bar, which is in effect going to go through here, and it's going to be threaded down at the bottom so that it can be locked in place either side of this bracket by these 2 little 1/8 BSP brass nuts. It's also going to be threaded at the top side, which is going to be 1/8 BSP again, and that's going to screw into the steam whistle, and then that'll allow us to mount the steam whistle to this bracket. The internal diameter of the air hose I'm going to be using is 4mm, so I'll have to bore the brass bar out with a 4mm hole, and the whole thing only has to be about 60mm long. So what we'll do, I'll cut a piece off this and then we'll stick it in the lathe and let's make a bulkhead fitting. Right, there we go, we've got a piece of the brass bar now mounted in the lathe. First thing I'm going to do is face this end off here, just so we've got a nice flat end, and then what we'll do, we'll bore it out to about 70mm, which will be plenty for the entire length of the part. So we'll just face this off and then we'll mount a chuck and drill bits in here to bore the hole. So let's get started. as you can see, we've got a nice clean edge here. So what we'll do, we'll put a centre drill in the chuck and we'll bore this out to 4mm. So there we go, I've mounted a chuck into the tailstock with a centre drill. So the first thing we'll do, we'll just drill a very small pilot and then we can run a 4mm drill bit through. And there we go. That part is now bored all the way through. So what we'll do now, I've marked this up to 30mm long there, which is how long the thread needs to be that goes through the bracket. That'll give enough room for the two locking nuts, the bracket, and then enough room for the airline coupling, which is also 1/8 BSP, to screw onto the bottom. So the outside diameter of a 1/8 BSP thread is 9.72mm. So we're going to turn the outside diameter down to about 9.72mm, which is, we've got to remove 0.3 of a millimetre, which is roughly 12 thou. So we'll do that now. Should be roughly 9.7mm. We'll just double check with these calipers. 9.7. There you go. So that's pretty much bang on. Now I've turned the part round and I'm going to do the same on this side, which is remove 12 thou from the surface, just to allow the die to cut into the material properly. Now the lock nut is just over 3mm in width, and the depth of the steam whistle, the thread in the steam whistle, is 8mm. So if we cut that down 11mm, that should be plenty of room for the lock nut and the thread for the inside of the steam whistle. So what I'll do, I'll put a little mark 11mm in, and I'll know that's where to stop taking material off. terribly accurate, it's just to make it a touch easier for the die. I mean, the die is going to cut it anyway. There we go, 9.7, bang on. So here we are, I've popped the die holder in the tailstock of the lathe. I've reduced the gear ratio of the lathe as well, so the spindle and the chuck is going to go as slow as it possibly can. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cut the 1/8 BSP thread for the steam whistle. There we go, that's gone to 11mm. So now we'll back it off and then that's that thread done. There we go, that's the 1/8 BSP thread where the steam whistle is going to sit. So now I'll reverse the part and we'll cut the same thread on the other side, but of a length of around 30mm. There we go, the part's now been turned around in the lathe and we're ready to cut the 1/8 BSP thread that is going to hold the lock nuts and the airline fitting. So we'll cut that now. Right, so that's the machining of the part done. So let's take it out and have a look. So there we go, that's the part complete. The thread at the top will allow us to screw on the steam whistle, and the long thread at the bottom will allow us to attach it to the bracket with the lock nuts and also allow us to screw on the 1/8 BSP airline fitting at the bottom. The last thing to do with the part is just to shine up this centrepiece, because that's going to be visible between the top of the engine casing and the bottom of the steam whistle. So we'll do that on the buffing wheel now. So we'll take this back to the bench and we'll give it a final buffing with a cloth. So there you go, that's the finished part. I've given it a quick buff with a cloth after using the buffing wheel, but the final finish will be done when it's actually fitted to Nessie, because it's going to get fingerprints and all sorts all over it. So what we'll do now, we'll assemble everything together and just make sure everything fits together as intended. So the first thing we want to do is screw on our first lock nut. And we'll screw the whistle lock nut on the other side. And then for the whistle, now the bracket, and for the second lock nut that goes behind the bracket, and then this is going to be the airline fitting, which is going to connect the airline to the bottom of this bulkhead fitting. So there we go. As a first test fit, I'm quite happy with that. So that's basically how it's going to sit. Sorry, get that in camera. Yeah, that's basically how it's going to sit on Nessie. And with the little bend on the bracket and the curvature of the engine casing, the whistle should come straight out of the top, nice and bonny. So you can see there how that's made. Now it's only a test fit, it's all going to come to pieces again and be sealed properly. But this longer thread here gives us the ability to adjust the steam whistle up and down. So, well, basically till it looks right. So, well, I think that'll do for this video. I'm going to go and have my tea. That's been a good night getting that made. So I hope you join me next time. Because then we'll be drilling the hole in the top of the engine casing for the steam whistle to go through, and we'll be fitting the compressor and rigging up all the airlines and circuitry. So thanks ever much for watching. Take care.